Okay, so in this problem, we're given some information, and we're going to go ahead and look at our whiteboard and get all this information down. First of all, we're testing the hypothesis that the mean did not change. So in the information, it told us that, let me see if I can go back real quick. In the problem, it told us that the average person slept 503 minutes. So that is going to be our null, 503 minutes, that did not change. We have a random sample of 65 people, so N is going to be 65, and the standard deviation is going to be 56, and alpha is going to be 0.02. So let's look at all of our information and let's get everything, all of our pieces down so we can work this problem. So we know that N equals 65, and we know that our standard deviation is 56, and then we know that alpha is 0.02. So before we actually get into working this, let's discuss what the difference between a type 1 and a type 2. So the type 1 error would be we rejected the null when the null was actually true. So here, a type 1 error would say that we accidentally rejected that the mean is 503. We actually rejected that we rejected that it did not change when really it did change, because we rejected this, which would mean it stayed the same. So a type 1 error occurs when we conclude that it changed, but really it didn't change because we actually rejected something that wasn't true. And then a type 2 error is when we don't reject the null, but we should have. So if we don't reject the null, we're saying that there was no change when really there was a change. So you have to get those straight in your head you have to really work that out in your mind to understand what we're saying there. Okay, so one more time, if the null, if we don't reject the null, or if we accept the null, that means we're saying nothing changed. If we reject the null, we're saying there was a change. So make sure you know the differences. So I will put type 2 error is when the null isn't rejected, but it should have been. In other words, the null is not right, but we said it was. So that's an error on our part. Okay, so let's go on to step 2. So in step 2, we know the level of significance is 0.02, and we know that this is a two-tailed test. So the way that we figure out what our values are is we can go into StatCrunch, if I can find it. Okay, to get our z-value for our critical means using technology, we know that we want our alpha to be 0.02. So if you type in 0.98 here, because 0.1 minus 0.02 would give you 0.98, this will give you your z-values to help calculate your critical mean. So now we know our z-values are negative or critical z values are 2.33. So now we can go and we can figure out what our critical means are. We're going to have two of those. So let's calculate our critical means. So what we do is we take our null mean, which is 503, and then we do plus or minus our critical our z value for our critical mean, and then we do that times 56 divided by the square root of 65. And if you do that in your calculator, your two values, your critical mean values you should get are 486.82 and 519.18. Okay, now we can take our critical mean values and find our lower and upper z values. And you can use technology. I just used the formula, and we're finding it. We're trying to find. Let me show you real quick so you know where we're going with this. We're trying to find the type 2 error giving the actual average hours of sleep is 505. So let's do the 505. So we would subtract 505. We would take both of our values and subtract 505. And then we would divide these by 56 divided by the square root of 65. 56 divided by the square root of 65. So you would put both of those in, and I believe we got I can't remember exactly what I got on that because I scribbled it out. I think I got 2.04 and negative 2.65, but I'm going to pause it and check. So it looks like I got positive 2.04 and negative 2.62. We can turn this around to get the smallest one first. So let's look at that. If we put in over here our lower value, which was negative 2.62, and our upper value we got 2.04. So our probability rounded to 3 decimal places would getting a type 2 error would be 0.975. And that is what we got. Now let's instead of 505 minutes, let's calculate the probability of a type 2 error given the actual hours of sleep is 501 minutes. So if we go back to our whiteboard, what we would do is we would erase this 505 and change it to 501 for both of these. Everything else will stay the same, and then we will put that into our calculator. And I think this time I'm going to pause it and just double check my numbers. So my lower value is negative 2.04 and my upper value is 2.62. So let's look at that in our calculator and see. I'm going to X out of this one just because, so we can use this. So this time we're going to put in a negative 2.04, and our upper value is going to be 2.62. So we get 0.975 again when we round. And that is how you calculate a type 2 error. Just to review one last time and make sure that you write this down in your notes. A type 2 error is when the null is not rejected, so we're saying there's no change in this particular problem when it should have been rejected, so there is actually a change. Let me know if you have any questions.